Let's talk rentals in British Columbia, because there's a lot of talk out there that the BC NDP are thinking about extending the 60-day notice for a landlord or buyer to occupy a property out to maybe 4 or even 6 months or more. Well, unless something radical happens between me right now shooting this video and posting it, let me assure you that this is not the case. But there's a lot of confusion out there right now, so I'm going to explain what the confusion is and what has really changed within residential tenancy, specifically due to owner occupying evictions, or what we refer to in the business as personal use. And we're going to cover that in today's video. But before I do that, I'd just love to invite you to subscribe to the channel if you would like to stay up to date here on Surrey and the Fraser Valley real estate market. And if you're looking for clarity about BC residential tenancies, please go ahead and click the like button for the YouTube algorithm, because that will help get this video out to more people just like you who are trying to navigate being a landlord or a tenant. And of course, if you need help, no, not renting, but rather purchasing or selling residential real estate here in the Lower Mainland, you can book a call with me right now using the link in the description below at a time that works best for you. And now let me add the disclaimer that I alluded to a little bit, that I am a landlord of multiple units and I self-manage those units, but I am not licensed in real estate for rentals or property management. Rather, I help my clients with their residential purchases and sales. So if you have any legal questions regarding tenancy here in the province, you should always refer to the Residential Tenancy website for BC. And understand that the Residential Tenancy Act is what governs both landlords and tenants within the province. And I'm actually going to share a page from that website here with you today, and specifically a page regarding ending tenancies. So this page will be linked down below in the show notes, because if you're going to evict your tenants, you better make sure you're doing it very, very correctly. Now, there's different reasons why you can, for instance, if there's no paid rent, you can evict tenants within 10 days. You can serve 1 month's notice for things like repeated late rents. You can do lots of different things to evict lots of different people for lots of different reasons. But there has been changes here, and I'm going to cover them, and they have to do more with not only your own use of your own property that's currently tenanted, but also if you're going to do renovictions. I think the biggest one that I saw that actually came out, the biggest effect, is the 4-month notice. So now to evict someone for the purpose of what they have coined renoviction, if you want to fix up the property in order to sell it, or if you want to fix up the property in order to move into it for yourself, or if you want to fix up the property because it's terrible and your tenant shouldn't be living there in the first place, you want to evict them so you can bring it up to a standard, that has now been extended to 4 months. And that makes a lot of sense to me. You give the tenant lots of notice. Let's face it, if you're doing any of that work, you should probably have permits. It's going to take you at least 4 months to get those permits anyway. So I have no problem with a 4-month eviction for the purpose of what they've coined renoviction. But all the talk out there is that the BC NDP could be thinking about the personal use segment of the 60-day notice that could be changed. So what does that mean? Right now, if it's the middle of June and I'm going to occupy my own property for my own use, I'm going to evict a tenant, I can serve notice any day before June 30th if my tenancy starts on the 1st of the month. And then I have notice for both July and August, and I could technically move in September 1st. So that is what we call 60 days notice, or 60 days clear notice. But in this recent article and others, I have seen that apparently the BC NDP is considering changing that and extending it out to a longer time frame. Now think about that. If I serve my notice on, I don't know, middle of June or even June 1st, which is too late, I now give a full another month's notice, and that second month is actually totally free. I cannot charge rent to the tenant for that second 30 days. But this line here says that, well, they are considering extending that. They could make it another 30 days, so they could make it 90, 120. They could even push it out to 6 months. But why would that be a bad idea? Well, if I'm occupying the unit for myself, I could see an argument to extend it to 90 days to make things easier on the tenant. I think 120 days is absolutely ridiculous. Most people buying and selling real estate can't go past 120 days. The reason they can't secure a property now and guarantee they're going to move into that property 120 days from now, like our buyers buying real estate, is that the mortgage approvals for those particularly fixed term rates, they only last 120 days. So if rates go up before you move in and you've negotiated 160 days, you could have to requalify for your property. You may not qualify for the property that you just signed off on, and you could end up in a lawsuit. So if you extend this same sort of maybe larger notice, 90 or 120 or even longer date to a purchase, so a tenant, let's get this straight in our heads, it's a tenant-occupied property. The landlord owns it. The landlord sells it to a buyer who's going to use that property for their own needs. There's no way they could actually purchase that property for themselves should they have to require something like a 120-day notice, because they can't guarantee they'll still be able to purchase that property on the other side of that 120 days. But now let's hop back into the tenancy website, because this is where you have to go to understand exactly what is going on and what the confusion is. So let's look at this 2-month notice. There's a whole section here on the 2-month notice, but this is what changed. They did not change the notice as of yet anyway, as of shooting this. Hopefully they don't change it before I put out this info. But as of right now, what has changed is if you're going to occupy that unit for yourself, you must live in it for the preceding 12 months after. That used to only be 6 months. So here's what would happen before. If you had a problem tenant that continuously was an issue, or unfortunately, if you had a tenant that was paying way below market and you could no longer service that property, what some landlords would do creatively, let's call it, is they would serve notice. They would move into that property for up to 6 months, re-rent it out on the other side, and they would be happy. The original tenant would be out on the street, but they would get higher rent later on. I don't think it's ethical. You take on the risk as the landlord, but that's what they would do. Well, now they're saying you have to live in that property for 12 months. The other part that is confusing, now this didn't change. This has always been the same. They don't allow you to just rent it to anyone else. You could rent it to a family member, or more specifically, a close family member. But you have to understand that a close family member is very specifically defined as the landlord's spouse, their parents or children, or the landlord's parents or children. So this is mother, father, son, daughter, spouse. Those are the only people that you are allowed to evict for, and yourself, of course. You are not allowed to move in your brother or your cousin or somebody coming from another country. You can't do any of that stuff. So if you're a tenant, you need to understand that. If you're being evicted and they said, my brother's going to move in, cool, I'm not going anywhere, right? That's your right. The brother is not close family. It's mother, father, son, daughter. But let's head back up now to this 12-month period. What used to happen is you used to be able to move in for 6 months. So this would happen actually a lot in, for instance, basement suites. The tenant would be such a pain in the butt that they would say, you know what? I'm going to kick you out. I'm going to use it for myself. I'm going to give the kids a playroom back, or my teenager needs a bedroom downstairs, whatever it is. That's fine. You would have to occupy that for 6 months. You couldn't rent it again for 6 months. Well, now that is 12 months. And if you're a tenant that got kicked out of that situation and you find out that they do rent the unit back out before that time period is done, well, you actually can now sue. And by sue, I don't know if that's the right term, but you can definitely take them to the Residential Tenancy Board and you can look for compensation. And now the compensation is up to that entire 12 months worth of rent to get back. But there was some other things that did change as well. There's other notices here. It's hilarious. A 12-month notice for converting to a manufactured home park. Like, I don't know how often this type of thing would actually happen, but there are other things that can happen, and specifically for personal use. And this is one of the new things that was put in place. On April 3rd, landlords were prohibited from ending tenancies for personal occupancy if the rental is located in a building that contains 5 or more units and is non-stratified title, or is stratified title where the owner owns all of the units. So that means if, for instance, in Vancouver, you would have these small little 9 and 10 unit apartment buildings. Well, an owner lived in one, there was only one title to the whole building. You cannot renovict basically those people. I guess you could renovict them, but what they did was they got creative. You could renovict them under the 4-month guidelines. But what landlords were doing is they were living in one unit until there was another unit that had been there a long time. Their rent was really low. Then they would move into that unit on 60 days notice, live in it for 6 months, and they would flip that all the way around the building to continuously drive up rent. So now that has been eliminated. And I do want to point out another couple of things in these couple of web pages that I've shown you. So on April 3rd, this new rule came in, and a bunch of these new rules came in. You'll see that April 3rd date. This previous article that referred to the possibilities of things changing was posted on April the 2nd. And I'm fairly confident that the 60-day personal use for owner-occupier will not be changed, because we had the housing minister on a week after this article came out, and, well, he mentioned nothing of the sort. And I specifically asked him, is there anything else that's coming out in the next little bit that's going to be mind-blowing? And he absolutely said, no, at this point, these are the changes that we're looking at. But what would happen if the NDP actually did change that 60-day notice to maybe 120? Well, personally, I think it would be an absolutely catastrophic downside to rentals. And here's why. Buyers won't want to invest in rentals if they can't sell the rental in the future. It would just be an absolutely stupid business model if I could never liquidate my asset. Over time, that would cause rentals to disappear. This could be good for home prices if you're a purchaser. But with fewer and fewer rentals becoming available over time because you don't have these mom and pop landlords anymore, rents would inevitably go up. And the mom and pop landlord would be removed from the landscape. And that would have you, as a renter, if you are in that situation, you would be now for sure paying either a large company or possibly a REIT or even the government because of all of the incentives that are being put into purpose-built rentals right now. And personally, I would much rather pay my rent to another citizen than to pay it to the government for that money to be further mismanaged in the future. Let me know what you think about this in the future, or if you think the NDP is going to come out and extend the 60-day notice to either 90 or 120 days. Thank you so much for watching. Remember to subscribe, click the like button, and we'll see you in a couple of days.